My name is India, the British India of 1917. Since the withdrawal of the order of the magistrate served on Mr. Gandhi, the work of recording statements has continued without interruption. Nearly 4,000 statements have been taken. Riots have flocked to the two stations, Motihari and Betia. The rush has been so great that the volunteers have not been able to cope up with the work from day to day. The volunteers are all local pleaders who have performed their work with great zeal and devotion. Babu Brij Kishore Prasad has superintended this part of the work. The names of the other volunteers are Babu Rajendra Prasad, Babu Dharanidhar, Babu Gorak Prasad, Babu Ramnaumi Prasad, Babu Shambhu Saran, and Babu Anagrah Narayan Sinha. Chance comers have also assisted occasionally. Several villages have been visited and hundreds of riots have been seen in their homes. Planters have always been invited to attend the meetings with the riots. They have, however, not attended. Their zamindars have. Planters have been individually seen by Mr. Gandhi, and there was a conference between representative planters and him. The planters were quite courteous but uncompromising. They overstated their case inasmuch as they claimed that they had always acted as a benefactors of their riots and that they had protected them from the rapacity of moneylenders. Frequent interviews have taken place between the local officials and Mr. Gandhi. The former have been more open than the planters and have certainly shown a desire of amicable settlement. The officials have never concealed their opinion that they did not approve of the mission. Some of them only reluctantly carried out the government instructions to give Mr. Gandhi every facility. The result has been that it has not always been an easy matter to obtain information from them. They have expressed stronger disapproval of the presence of the helpers mentioned above. The sub-divisional officer at Beteha often said that he was afraid of a conflagration taking place any day by reason of the inquiry. He said that the riots had grown bolder and had formed a highly exaggerated notion of the results of the mission. He even reported to the government that unless the inquiry could be stopped, he could not be responsible for the peace of the district under his charge. Others too went to Ranchi to complain to the government that they were afraid of their own safety if the inquiry was continued. It was on account of this that Mr. Gandhi was invited to meet Honorable Mr. Maud at Bankipur on the 10th instant. Work has been burnt down. The planters grew nervous and even suggested that it might be due to our inquiry. There seems to be no connection between the fire and the inquiry. Mr. Mott suggested that the inquiry might now usefully be closed entirely and that Mr. Gandhi might submit his report to the government and that if the inquiry could not be stopped, Mr. Gandhi should withdraw the pleader friends from the district. Mr. Gandhi stated that the inquiry could not be entirely stopped, but that he has advanced far enough to enable him to frame preliminary conclusions, that he could not as point of honor think of dispensing with the help of the pleader friends whom he considered to be as sober and honorable as himself and who were of the greatest assistance to him and his work. Mr. Maud was quite conciliatory to his conversation. The enclosed representation is the result of the interview. The inquiry continues except to the extent that, instead of statements being recorded as heretofore by the volunteers, Mr. Gandhi will himself, as soon as he is free to be able to do so, sit for a few hours daily among the riots and, after hearing their statements, record his impressions. The representation is deliberately an understatement. The condition of the riot is far worse than is pictured there. It is not capable of being understood by a layman. The planters' rule has practically supplanted the rule of the local government. Nobody has the courage to speak up for the riots. The latter do not readily get the assistance from the local muktars. Many have privately come to Mr. Gandhi and told him much worse stories of oppression that have been recorded in the statements. In Fiji and Natal, the evil was represented by a single law. The evil was dealt with if the law could be removed. In Champaran, the evil is like a weed growing everywhere and anyhow, and in growing has smothered all law and order. The very laws of the protection of the riots have been used by the planters to reduce them to serfdom. As the planters have placed themselves above law, even decrees of the courts have had no binding effect on them in many cases. The evil, therefore, will require a tremendous effort before it is checked. No stone is being left unturned to induce the planters to do justice without the necessity of a great and very serious public agitation. The desire is, by inviting the government to deal with the planters firmly, to avoid the publication of a report which is bound to stagger India. Public men and women of India will never be able to sit still if the report has ever to be published until the wrongs it will narrate are remedied. The mere narration is calculated to rouse passion, and therefore every effort is being made to bring about a settlement without any public agitation. If the settlement comes, or even if it does not, it is necessary to post volunteers in villages to act as links between the planters and the riots, to steal the latter's heart, and by their very presence to protect them from the tyranny of the Amlas, etc. The volunteers will be expected to remain in the village for at least 6 months. Their work will be smooth if the government approve their presence. It will be risky if they do not. It is to be done in any event. Whilst they are all in the village, they will teach the village boys and girls and will give the riots lessons in elementary sanitation. It may be stated that the riots are the most backward and ignorant of almost any in India. Education is admittedly in the lowest stage in this district. Sanitation is of the worst type. Children are ill-looking because they are ill-fed. The adult population suffers from some disease or other. Many suffers from an ugly growth on the throat called goiter. They have no physical or moral stamina. Even the Rajputs are seized with a fear which it is humiliating to observe. The present volunteers are pledged to the work above sketched. It is not expected that Bihar will contribute many more volunteers of the type required. The greatest care is being exercised in choosing them. They have to be learned, responsible and sober men. Those who will receive these notes are expected kindly to use their influence in securing volunteers and getting them to send their names. At least 100 such volunteers are required. Those who need support for their families will have it given them, so far as it is on a moderate scale. This is the third note on the situation in Champaran. The planters are, it is evident, trying to quash the mission or to discredit it. The first remedy to secure their end was to tell the government that their lives were in danger, owing to the presence of the mission in Champaran, and to suggest that there should be a commission appointed to investigate the relations between the planters and the riots. Their lives are no more in danger now than they were before. The riots are too docile and too much cowed down to attempt any such thing even if they wished it. Moreover, the creed of the mission is absence of violence under every conceivable circumstance. Mr. Gandhi himself, in his letter to the Viceroy, written just after his arrival, suggested a commission when he was about to be imprisoned. But in the light of the discovery since made, any commission can only delay relief, and the leaders, after knowing the situation, as it is partly disclosed in the representation to the government already sent to them, cannot contemplate the possibility of the grievances continuing for an indefinite time. Most of the serious grievances are admitted. They have not been disappeared because the government have been supine. They have been afraid to apply the remedies with firmness. They have placed too much reliance upon the good faith of the planters, and the planters have disregarded both the laws and the government instructions. No commission can deal with such a situation. The government alone can do it. if they wish or are forced. It is clear that the planters want a commission which would supplant and extinguish the activities of the mission. The workers in that cause cannot, without doing the greatest violence to their conscience, retire in the favor of a commission. Of the commission can therefore be accepted only if the continuing wrongs are remedied now, and if the members appointed on the commission are such as to inspire confidence, and this on understanding that the mission is to continue its work. The scope of it will be changed if a commission is appointed. That is, the mission, instead of conducting the inquiry, will be collecting evidence to be placed before the commission and taking the villagers' statement. The wrong that must be readdressed before the commission is accepted are the abolition, not in the name but in reality, of abwabs or illegal cesses extracted by the planters, the abolition of the damages in lieu of the indigo cultivation, whether in lump sum or by way of sharabeshi, the abolition of the thin khatiya in every shape or form, the abolition of the custom of imposing fines on riots, the abolition of force in exacting labor or other obedience to the planter's will. What therefore the commission will inquire into will be the condition of the tenure of the planters, the property and possibility of securing the riots a refund of the illegal cesses already taken by the planters, the condition under which labor has been received by the landlords, the sufficiency or otherwise of the wages received by the laborers, the causes of the deep poverty of the masses and their utter helplessness. The above points have merely to be mentioned to know that the planters contemplate a commission totally different from the one we should accept. The safest plan, therefore, for the press and public, in so far as it may be necessary to give an opinion, is to insist on the redress of the admitted wrongs first, and then accept appointment of a commission, if found necessary, it being always understood that the workers continue their work in any event. The second method adopted by the planters is to seize or create incidents in order to make the government nervous about the mission and to intimidate the mission and its helpers. One fire has already been used. The popular belief is that the damage done is slight and that is the work of the planters themselves. But the idea may be dismissed. The fire may be accepted as an accident or the act of an incendiary, not in any way connected with the mission. Mr. Hayhawk's letter in answer to Mr. Gandhi's question shows that damage done is at the most rupees 20,000. He himself emphasizes the fact that it is a rough estimate, that is, given by the planters. He has no evidence that there is a slightest connection between the inquiry and the fire. To this may be added the fact that no member of the mission has gone to these parts, and that the outwork was not in use when the fire broke out. Another fire broke out on the 19th instant. A kacheri has been burnt down. It is not known whether it has been utilized by the planters for the end suggested above. That fire did take place in a place just newly visited by the mission. Mr. Gandhi went there on Wednesday and the fire broke out on Friday last. Immediately on the outbreak of the fire, information was brought to Mr. Gandhi that it was probably the work of the Kothi people. A statement has been recorded to the effect that a factoryman was seen the very evening removing a bundle of papers. The inference being that the papers were removed prior setting the kacheri on fire. Support is lent to the story from the fact that the manager and the subdivisional officer were present at the inquiry for a short time on Wednesday. That the riots mentioned firmly that they were forcibly made to take Zeerat land, which was made to bear the losses which the concern suffered owing to the fall in the prices of indigo. That the manager in bravado said that he would gladly take the Zeerat back. That Mr. Gandhi promptly invited the names of those who wanted to surrender the Zeerat land. As the theory runs, this mishap must have enraged the manager, and in order to discredit the inquiry, he must have instigated the fire. On Thursday, the day previous to the fire, the manager went to a neighboring village and spoke roughly to the people inasmuch as he had surrendered their Zeerat, and threatened them by saying he would insist on their regrowing indigo. The riots remained unmoved. This would be an additional reason for starting the fire. This, however, is purely an impression which may have no foundation in facts. One thing is certain, that the mission has absolutely nothing to do with the fires. The value of the kacheri is unknown. It is not likely to be more than rupees 200. The third method adopted is continuous pinpricks administered to the villagers. The latest instance for organized intimidation is where the factory amlas went to a village and molested the laborers of a small zamindar, who is co-sharer in a small zamindari with the factory and who declines to surrender his share to it, and who is alleged to have circulated among the riots the news of the mission. Statements have been received abundantly proving the alleged intimidation. Reports are continuously being received from individual riots to the effect that they are threatened with all kinds of penalties for going to Mr. Gandhi, and they come at considerable risk to themselves. Needless to say that anything will deter the workers from continuing their work. To abandon it would mean a terrible wrong done to the riots. The presence of a body of workers always listening to the simple but pathetic tale of their woes, and the knowledge that they are striving to help them, and that the latter would go to them in the hour of need, have buoyed them up and have given them hope and courage. The workers will be unworthy of their cause and country if, through the fear or anything else, they for a moment thought of withdrawing until the riots are able to breathe free. Mr. Gandhi has addressed to the district magistrate of Champaran a letter on the incidents above set forth. Copies of this letter and other documents will be sent herewith or will shortly follow. The precautions thus taken may restrain the planters in their plan of intimidation. But the situation may develop at any moment and lawlessness may break out in intense form. It will now be understood that if this happens, the fault will in no way be that of the members of the mission, and that the public will understand that the mission will continue its work. The foregoing emphasizes the need for getting volunteers ready so that they may start at a moment's notice. The volunteers must be grown up, responsible, sober and educated men. They should be inured to hardships or ready to bear hardships. They should come prepared to see the struggle through. They must have workable knowledge of Hindi. They must be prepared to go to villages and live in the midst of the riots. It is estimated that they will have to work for at least 6 months. With reference to the pioneer statement announcing the Bihar government's intention to appoint a committee of inquiry into the relations between the zamindars and tenants in general and European planters and their riots in particular, Mr. Gandhi had issued the following statement to the press. If the continuing are immediately readdressed, any inquiry covering definite issues with a time limit as to its findings is likely to meet the existing situation. The work of my colleagues and myself will then, for the time being, mostly consist in marshalling leading evidence before the inquiry committee. The matters seem to be reaching a crisis, as will appear from the enclosed letter from the government and reply thereto. If Mr. Gandhi and his colleagues are removed, it is expected that the leaders will one after another step into the breach. In order to do this, it is necessary to realize the inner situation here. It is this: the riots are also paralyzed and have suffered so long that they now feel the warmth of the proximity of their own countrymen, who are at least willing to listen to them if they can render no effective help. This has been enough to rouse their drooping spirits. It will be cruel to leave them unguarded until the question is settled and their independence guaranteed to them. Forcible removal of the mission is likely to lead to terrorism, and under it to recantation of the statements hitherto made. A further note with the papers referred to it in the reply to the Chief Secretary will follow.